the title of my talk that I started with was Finding the Perfect Customer Experience. And then within about 5 minutes of deciding I was going to talk about this, I realised there probably is no perfect customer experience. So it needs to be all about your own version of. So this whole talk is going to cover kind of how to apply it to your own business and to your own customers, rather than that whole one-size-fits-all model. To give you a bit of background about me, so I'm head of SEO at an agency called White.net, where we do a whole range of services, so technical, content, digital PR, and paid media as well. My background started off in technical SEO, which I then very quickly got bored of and was like, no, I'm all about content and do content marketing forevermore. And then that quickly moved on to wanting to do social. What I've kind of established was that all of those things kind of lead to the same outcome. So it's kind of a bit simpler to say, I basically just try and make websites better, which should help for customers, and then those brands should sell more. So that's how I help my clients, rather than through any of those core kind of principles, because I cover a whole range. What you see here is like a mass of clients that we've worked with. So this isn't just look how great we are because we've got these really big clients. Instead, what you need to focus on is how different all of these clients are, and how each of their customers and their target audiences are different too, which means that finding that perfect customer experience for each of our clients covers a whole different range of problems each time. So the first place to start really is, what customer experience are we aiming for? So there's two kind of distinct views on this. So you can kind of go for a utilitarian approach and say that you want the maximum customer happiness across your kind of total sum of happiness, or we can go egalitarian and say we want every customer to be equally happy, or we can say, actually, I don't really care about how happy my customers are. As long as they're buying, does it matter that someone's super pleased with your brand or not? Which kind of leads me to the fact we need to stop using the word perfect. So to me, perfect is such a difficult concept because it's different for each and every person, but it's also different for each and every brand. And it's also just completely unrealistic that we're ever going to hit that point of perfection, because your customers are ever changing, and therefore so should the way you handle that. So it's a bit like SEO. It's completely iterative. You're never going to settle on just one version. The main cause of this is the fact that each and every person that interacts with your brand completely different. Based on that, you need to be aware of the fact that you're always going to need to be collecting information and trying to understand those customers better. There's two really clear ways you can manage that. So you can go for the whole expensive black box targeting suites. Now, these are great, but let's be realistic, they're difficult to use. Not only are they pricey, but you also have to deal with the fact that they can skip out on anomalies, and it can just be challenging to collect all the right data because sometimes it can be really skewed. And then the other side of that, you can look towards personalization programs. Now, when you start doing personalization, whether that's built into your CMS or with other platforms that you're integrating into what you're doing, you have to deal with the fact that generally they're quite difficult to use, and also, to be perfectly honest, they can mess up your SEO. So some of them, you can end up having multiple variations of one page, all of that nonsense, that it just is another SEO problem to deal with. And even if you were using all of the data collection tools and you knew what every single individual wanted, you have to then think about how much it's going to cost you to deal with that. So how expensive will it be to then meet the needs of every single individual? So just by getting the right information doesn't mean you'll necessarily be able to solve the problem. So my background actually originally started out in economics. So I always recommend that we use something that's called Pareto Optimal. Now, a Pareto Optimal is the point at which the sort of economic efficiency where you can't make any change that's going to make someone else better off unless you're going to make someone worse off. So you keep making small tweaks, and with each tweak you make, you find that one or two people are happier and everyone else stays exactly the same. This is great because it kind of gives you a good measure and a benchmark to start from when you make a choice on what you're going to do. For the rest of the presentation, pretty much the choices that I'm going to talk about making to improve your customer experience is based on the fact that you've already established that they're the Pareto Optimal. The best way to see this working in real life is really to just tackle a real life example. So we're going to talk about short haul flights. What really matters to an individual when they're booking a short haul flight? You've got a whole range of experiences that are involved. So whether that's your booking or how you get to the actual plane itself, the kind of care you get during the flight, so basically how many bar services you get, and then the aftercare service as well. So how quickly do your bags come out? Do they follow up with an email to ask how your flight was? Do they apologise when you're inevitably late? That kind of thing. The flight industry is actually one that generally does customer experience really well because it identifies what the main point is for each of its customers. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about Ryanair. Back in February, Ryanair announced that they were going to invest a lot of money into smartwatches, into making sort of compatible apps that were going to help people find check-in gates and help them navigate their way around the airport better. So the first question here is, will adding a smartwatch compatible technology and maps of the airport and the check-in gate help those who are finding the airport experience stressful? Well, yeah, these people are going to be happier because they can navigate easier, they've got all the information they need on their wrist, and it's quicker. Like, think about the average smartwatch user. They're probably a business person, they're probably in a rush, and they're probably those people that turn up to the gate 3 minutes before it closes. And then you then look at how that will impact people that don't prioritise that bit of the travel. So the person that cares the most about the in-flight experience, are they going to be worse off by having this smartwatch app? Well, no, it's not going to hinder their experience. And then you move on and say, well, what are you sacrificing by spending the time and resources on this change? So one of the main complaints of people that are on flights is there's not enough legroom. Well, if Ryanair want to fix how much legroom on their flight, the best thing that they can do is build new planes. So they could build new planes and double the size of them. Or they could take fewer people and take half the chairs out. Great. But that's not really practical for a brand because the amount of money they'd lose on making those few customers that care about their legroom happier is massive. And not only is it not worth spending that much money, that's such a time investment in order to get to that point, to focus on the changes that they can actually implement. So we're going to move on to that horrible phrase I used, a pragmatic approach to the idealistic view of the dream customer experience. Basically, what I was trying to say, but I decided to use the longest words possible, was I just wanted to talk about how to make a customer experience strategy that you can actually implement on Monday. So thinking about things like, can I do something with smartwatches? Can I do something small that's going to drastically improve people's experience in one sector of the business, rather than thinking big and going for the biggest change you can make possible, which ultimately is going to take years to implement. So I've kind of simplified down what we see to be the typical purchase funnel. So moving a customer comes into the business through awareness of your brand and your product. They consider, they compare you to other options, then they purchase from you. And then you've got loyalty itself and getting that customer to keep on coming back to your brand. So the first step in building that customer experience and knowing what choice to make and where you want to invest your time and your money into your customer experience is to understand the behaviours. So start with, where do your potential and opportunity customers spend the most time? So categorise your keywords by the point in that funnel that they are and identify the high volume terms across broad ranges of terms. So basically look for where there's a lot of search going on and a lot of people looking for more things. You can use this tool that's actually made by Jono. It's a term tagger, and that will tag up your keywords based on where the tool detects they are in the funnel. You can also message him if it's missing certain keywords, and it helps build it out bigger. So it's going to make the tool better for everyone. And then look at how much difference you can make at that stage. So if you're seeing that there's loads and loads of search volume in that consideration phase, and there's not very much in the loyalty phase, but what's the cost involved to have an impact at that stage in the funnel? Are you able to change it? And then move on and look at where the competitors are differentiating themselves. So what stage of that funnel have they chosen to compete in? A lot of other brands will tend to compete up kind of basically in the purchase phase. So they'll be bidding on book flights now, and they'll be trying to rank for those terms rather than ranking for things like, where do I want to go on holiday, which could be a higher up point in the funnel for someone like Ryanair. And then what you need to do is you need to work out the opportunity cost. So if there's a loss of an alternative when you're making that choice, that's what your opportunity cost is. And to be honest, normally in marketing, that's always the result of something like a limited resource. So it would be related towards like the money being spent or the time your client's paying for you in order to get that done. So when you're making a choice, what we like to do is use something that we call the impact model, which is a means of comparatively scoring the potential impact of a change based upon the kind of impact you think it will have upon the overall customer experience. We start with 3 core metrics. The first one being the stage score. So you mark all options for your change that you know what you've already decided they're going to be Pareto Optimal. So take those Pareto Optimal options and mark them up based on where they are in the stage. And then how much time the user is spending in each stage as well. So if a user is spending a lot of time, so they spend 90% of their journey to purchase from you in the awareness stage, then you need to understand that that's a 4, whereas something in the loyalty stage where they're not really participating very much and they're quick to decide, that would be a 1. Then move on to scope of change. So how big a difference is that going to make to the current process? What sort of size impact do you think it can have? Is someone going to notice it immediately, or is someone going to not really notice that there's been a tweak? And then look at where the core competitors are. So basically count off out of your core competitors how many are in that stage. And then you just model it all out. So it's a really simple equation, and this kind of covers the basic level of what you need to be measuring against. And then customize and build it out to adapt it to your brand. So this is an example of one that we've built out for someone. So not only in the stage score do we leave it as just what time they're spending in that stage, we also do market research. So doing a survey that understands which stages your customers think you're succeeding at, so you can focus on the weaker area. So if they're well, actually they're great at customer loyalty, so even though they spend the most time there, but you're already good at it, so you might want to focus on the one they spend the second most time at. We then move that scope of change to also look at the speed of impact. So we multiply it out by how quickly the change is felt. Obviously, if a customer notices a positive change immediately, the impact will be quicker and better felt, and therefore your ROI will feel bigger sooner. And then you can, when you're dividing, so you've got your competitors and where they are in the stages there, you can also look to multiply the competitors by the resource level required to implement the change in order to understand how that would be for your internal team to implement, and whether you're going to need external resource and how big a cost that will be to your business. And then you also want to take away any negative impact. So if there's going to be a negative impact on another part of the business, then you need to factor that in. So obviously going back to kind of airlines and flights, if it's going to be a case of, say you go, I'm going to put 3 more bar services into each of my trips, well, your staff are going to be working longer hours when they're on the flights, and that was a major cause of a strike in the airline industry. So it shows that you need to understand the implications, not just that it will have on your own resources, but on the people that are interacting with your business. And then the final thing is to just look at what that success is actually going to appear like. So how are you going to measure that these changes have worked? There's your 3 kind of core ones here. So you should be getting a higher ROI if you're across all of the other bits of marketing you're doing. So if your customers are happier, they should be returning and they should still be purchasing from you. So by improving that, you should find that you're getting a higher ROI on the changes that you're making to your website and to your digital strategy. But you should also find you're getting better customer feedback. And whether you're doing a net promoter score, or you're doing any other forms of surveys on aftercare, or just reviews, then you should start to see those numbers going up too. And then the other thing is you'll find that you get smaller improvements to make each time. So when you start working out all those Pareto Optimal changes and you give them an impact model score, you'll find that the more times you do this process, the smaller that impact score will be each time, because the changes are tiny, tiny tweaks. They're quicker to make, but also they're just about small versions of the original bigger changes to customer experience. And that pretty much covers everything today. So thank you very much for listening, and I think I'm going to hand back to Joyce now.